Hormuz, the king of Iran, has a son, and he names him Parviz. In his youth, despite his father's justice, Parviz started violating people's rights. He, who went out of the city with his friends, celebrates at night in a villager's house, and their bells and songs ring in the air. Even the slave and his horse are not safe from this violation. When Hormuz learns of this incident, he executes justice without considering the father-son relationship. He kills Khosrow's horse. Ghulam gives him to the owner of a garden whose property was stolen, and Khosrow's throne also becomes the owner of a country house. Khosrow is also forgiven by the intercession of elders. After this incident, Khosrow sees Anushirvan, his ancestor, in a dream. Anushirvan gives him the good news that because he did not get angry and went to Hormuz to apologize to his father, instead of what he lost, he will receive a much more valuable blessing, a horse. In the name of Shabdiz, a magnificent throne, and a musician named Barbad. Some time passes until his special servant, Shapur, speaks sweetly to his nephew after describing the splendor and beauty of the queen who rules the land of Iran. Then he begins to describe her boundless beauty so that every listener's heart is captivated by this imaginary image. Even this beautiful horse is unique and unique. Shapur's words encourage Khosrow's inner lovebird to try in this fairy Wansima, and sends Shapur to Iran in search of sweets. Khosrow and Farhad's debate. When Shapur arrives at Shirin's hometown, he stays in Diri, and through the people of Diri, he learns about the arrival of Shirin and his companions to the nearby mountains. So he draws a picture of Khosrow and hangs it on a nearby tree. He sees Shirin drinking and orders them to bring him that roll. Shirin is so fascinated by this painting that his servants, fearing that he will be caught, destroy the painting and attribute its destruction to Divan. And under the pretext that the forest is the land of fairies, they take off their clothes and find another one. They are leaving. But there, Shirin again sees the image of Khosrow, who is drawn by Shapur, and faints. When he ordered to bring that picture, his companions hid it and once again involved the fairies in this work and went on a journey. In the new residence, Khosrow's image again fascinates Shirin, and this time Shirin personally goes to Naksh and picks it up and becomes so enamored of Khosrow that he looks for him from every passerby to find a trace of him. But it does not find anything. At this time, Shapur, who is wearing Megan's dress, passes by. Shirin calls him to tell him the name and location of that photo. In the solitude he had with Shirin, Shapur opens the veil of this secret and recounts the name and sign of Khosrow and the story of his love for Shirin. And just as he traps Khosrow in the trap of Shirin's love with his charming words, Shirin took the chicken. He flies towards Khosrow. Shirin, who is thinking of going to the city of Madain, takes a ring from Shapur as a sign of entering Khosrow's harem. Shirin, who used to be in love with an unseen lover, sits on Shabdiz at dawn and rushes to Madain. On the other hand, Khosrow, who was angered by his father, intends to leave Madain with the great advice of Omid. Before traveling, he orders the people of his harem to treat him with the utmost service and hospitality if Shirin comes to Madain, and he goes to Iran with a group of his slaves. On the way, when Shirin washes himself in a spring tired from the pain of the journey, he notices the presence of Khosrow. Both of them, who fall in love with one look, give up this love in the hope of reaching a more beautiful help. Khosrow hopes for a prince who is waiting for him in Aran, and Shirin remembers the owner of a picture who spends time with his love in his palace. Shirin reached Madain after traveling a long distance, but there was no trace of Khosrow. The maidservants kept her in the palace and tried to entertain her at the order of Khosrow. Shirin was very upset when he heard the news of Khosrow going to Aran. Because of Shirin's jealousy, his rivals lived in a mountain with bad weather, and during this time, Shirin lived only with the sadness of Khosrow's love. On the other hand, destiny had settled Khosrow in a palace where he sang sweetly, and his soulful voice echoed in its atmosphere. But neither the sound of his sweet steps nor his charming voice came. Shapur informs Khosrow about Shirin's departure to Madain and asks the Shah to go to Madain and bring Shirin with him to Khosrow. This time, Shapur obeyed Khosrow's order and brought Shirin to Khosrow, while he was in that Aran mountain with bad weather. Shirin has not reached the door yet. The news of Hormoz's death makes him bitter. After hearing this news, the young king decided to take the throne instead of his father. Shirin steps into the palace hoping to see her lover's face again, but he is still disappointed. While Khosrow had become the king in Iran, Bahram Chubin rose against him and incited the elders of the nation against Khosrow by accusing him of patricide. Khosrow, who finds everything lost, takes his own life and flees to Makhan. In the midst of these escapes and disturbances, one day he went hunting with his companions. He suddenly caught sight of Shirin, who had also come out of the palace to hunt. After a long time, these two lovers finally saw each other when Khosrow had lost the royal throne. Khosrow visited Mehin Bano's palace at Shirin's invitation. Mehin Bano, who was aware of the love between the two and Shirin's history with the good men of her harem, asked Shirin to entrust herself to Khosrow only in front of Ahed and the cabin and never talk to him in private. Shirin also swore to fulfill this request. Khosrow and Shirin were hunting goats together many times, but Khosrow could never reach his goal. Finally, Khosrow, after expressing many needs from Khosrow and Naz from Shirin, fell in love with his lover and decided to leave. There Mariam chose the daughter of the Roman king as his wife, and after some time marched to Iran with an army of Romans and won the royal throne. But while he had all the blessings of the world, he was in sorrow from a sweet distance. Shirin also had fever and restlessness when he separated from his lover. On her deathbed, Mrs. Mehin bequeaths her nephew to wait. Experience has shown him that sadness and happiness in the world are unstable, and he should not fall in love with any of them. After the death of Mehin Bano, Shirin ascended the throne and spread justice and wealth throughout his kingdom. But Khosrow was still restless. He entrusted the kingdom to one of the nobles of his court and went to the city of Mada'an. At the same time that Iqbal Khosrow was at his peak, he heard the news of Bahram Chubin's death. He gave up happiness and joy for 3 days, and on the 4th day, he sat in the assembly and proposed, hoping that the barbed songs would heal his soul. Barbad also chose 30 melodious songs from among his songs and played them. Khosrow also had a royal pardon for Barbad Roa in exchange for every new one. That night, after Khosrow went to Shabastan, sweet love was renewed in his heart. He begged Mariam to bring Shirin to his harem, but he was met with a sharp reaction from Mariam. Khosrow, who could no longer control his rebellious love, sent Shapur to ask Shirin. But Shirin quickly sent Shapur through his gate to Khosrow. This time Shirin stays in the same mountain and eats nothing but milk. Since it was very difficult to bring milk from a far pasture, Shapur introduced Farhad to Shirin to solve this problem. On the day Shirin and Farhad meet, Farhad falls in love with Shirin. This first meeting startles him so much that he loses consciousness and does not understand Shirin's instructions. When he emerges from her, he asks his servants for sweet words and realizes that he has to build a stone path from the pasture to Shirin's abode. Farhad hit the mountain with so much love that in 1 month he made a hole in the heart of the rock and built a pond at the end of it. Shirin gave her earring to Farhad as a reward, but Farhad gave it to Farhad with great respect and went to the desert. He also noticed this love. He called Farhad to him, and in the debate he had with him, he realized that he was not equal to his love for Shirin. So he decided to get rid of him in another way. Khosrow sends Farhad to carve a mountain out of stone and promises that if he does this, he will forget Shirin and his love. Farhad immediately goes to the foot of that mountain. First, he carved Shirin, Shah, and Shabdiz on it, and then he started carving the mountain with his memory. As far as the hadith of digging, the mountain became famous in the world. One day, Shirin rode a horse to visit Farhad and bought him a cup of milk. On the way back, his horse got stuck in the middle of the mountain and was afraid that it would fall. But Farhad put the horse and rider on his neck and took him to the palace. The news of Shirin's meeting with Farhad and the effect of this meeting on his ability to dig stones reaches Khosrow. Seeing Shirin lost, he looks for a solution. With the guidance of the wise elders, he sends a messenger to Farhad to inform him of Shirin's death, unless he slackens in what he has done. When Khosrow's courier brings the news of Shirin's death to Farhad, he drops the axe on the ground and falls to the ground himself. Shirin is saddened by his death and orders a dome to be built over his grave. Khosrow sends a humorous letter of condolence to Shirin and calls him to let go of his sadness. After a few days of this incident, Mariam also dies, and Shirin writes to her in response to Khosrow's letter and reminds her that losing her beauty is not important to her because whenever she wants, many beauties are ready. They serve him. After reading the letter to Frosty, Khosrow realizes that this letter is the answer to such words. After that, he made many attempts to get Shirin, but it was still fruitless and Shirin was like a distant dream. Khosrow, who was disappointed with Shirin, went to the city of Isfahan in search of a woman named Homa. Give refuge to Megar Shirin to escape from loneliness. Shirin spends days in these solitudes crying and moaning. One day, Khosrow went to Shirin Palace under the pretext of hunting. Shirin, who was informed of Khosrow's arrival, sent a maidservant to welcome Khosrow and gave him a house outside the palace. Then he himself went to the king. Displeased with the way the host treated him, the Shah reproachfully spoke to him and complained and expressed his needs, but Shirin continued to avoid him, insisting that only according to Khosrow's customs could he return to his love. To achieve. After a long and fruitless conversation, Khosrow returns from Qasr Shirin, disappointed and disappointed. With Khosrow's departure, loneliness becomes a sweet companion again and misses him. So he went to Khosrow's residence, and with the help of Shapur, he hid in a place far from the eyes of the king. Khosrow organizes a public meeting early in the morning. Shirin hides in a corner of the hall. On this night, Nick sings ghazal in Shirin language and barbad in Khosrow language. After singing a ghazal for a while, Shirin gives up his boredom and comes out of the tent. Khosrow, who finds his lover by his side, submits to Shirin's request and sends nobles to court her and brings her to his court with royal luxuries. After being satisfied with Shirin, Khosrow gives the government of Armenia to Shapur. Khosrow hears the sweet advice of establishing justice and being a student and acts on it. On the way to learning science, a long debate occurs between him and his teacher, in which he questions the nature of the heavens, the origin, resurrection, and many other issues. After some time, despite the fact that Khosrow is aware of the inherent evil of his son Shirovaya, at the request of his brother, he puts him on the throne and puts him in the crematorium. By taking power, Shiroye put the father in prison, and only Shirin was allowed to meet him. But Shirin's presence even in prison was pleasant and life-giving for Khosrow. One night when Khosrow was resting next to Shirin, an unknown person came to his bed and tore his liver with a knife. Even in the death struggle, he was not satisfied with the sweet pain and passed away silently. Shirin woke up from the bloody bed and saw her lover lifeless and moaning. Shiroya sent him a proposal message amid lamentation over his wife's death. Shirin also closed his mouth and said nothing. In the morning, when Khosrow was taken to the cellar, Shirin stepped into the cellar with royal majesty and fought with him in private and died next to Khosrow. The elders of the country, who saw this situation, buried Khosrow and Shirin in that tomb. Thank you for spending this time with me. Continue to shine and grow, and always know that you are and always will be the main character in your own life story. See you in the next video.